weird story on was it a Miami, New York, or New York, Miami flight? But it was in one of those directions. It was those two cities. And a family was thrown off the plane by Frontier. The family claims it was because they wanted an 18-month-old masked. The Frontier claims it's because after multiple requests, the family would not wear masks. Every this is the New York Times, New York Post, and many other places. Every other passenger that I read about, it doesn't mean every other passenger, but every other passenger that I read about said that they were masked the entire time. They were part of a Hasidic Jewish group, and all of them are seen wearing masks in the videos taken on the plane by people's smartphones. I think Frontier is an independent airline. And according to some, a reference was made to, we really got the Jews or something like that amongst the people there. They some of the crew actually clapped when they left. It's a troubling story if unless Frontier is telling the complete truth. Frontier looks ugly in this story. I don't know what to believe because I don't know the full story. It hasn't been reported, but every story I have read said they were masked and did include the cheering on of their removal by others and a reference to Jews. Normally, I don't even cover. I do cover the throwing off of families because of a 2-year-old, but there, for reasons that have nothing to do with science but superstition, we are living in the age of irrationality. Like there is no right answer in math. $1 million of the Gates Foundation to subsidize that movement. That there is no one right answer in mathematics. So we are living in the age of irrationality, wherein a 2-year-old has to wear a mask. In my opinion, it's absurd that any child under 21 wears a mask. As far as I'm concerned, with the clean air of a plane, it's absurd for anybody to have to wear a mask. This is all feel-good stuff because Dr. Fauci, I don't know, well, because Dr. Fauci said so. I was going to say because Dr. Fauci, and then I realized I didn't have the end of a sentence. I don't know what animates Dr. Fauci. Of course, you might say, the health and welfare of the American people. But if you say that, then obviously any doctor who differs with Dr. Fauci doesn't care about the health and welfare of the American people. Anyone who says you still need a mask after vaccination is more interested in frightening the American people than in healing the American people. And they have succeeded in frightening the American people, or many of the American people. You know that when former President Trump spoke at CPAC this weekend, it's amazing how refreshing it was to hear him. Not because of his tone, but because of what he said. I mean, do you realize it is now the law of the land that if you identify as the other sex, you are allowed to compete in women's sports? That reminds me, I should like to bring to your attention something I promised I would work on, and I finally did. I have a list of 32 questions that you should ask any relative or friend and send the list to any relative or friend to find out if that relative or friend is a liberal or a leftist. It's powerful stuff. I'm going to read to you the questions. I actually read it last night. I read it when it's published because when you see your work published, it looks different, as it were. And here, I'm going to call it up from, well, I would if my computer worked. It renders that difficult. That's too bad. All right, I'll get it up somehow. There are 32 questions, and I worked very hard in phrasing it in such a way as to make it completely clear so that the reader does not have to ask, well, what does that mean? What do you mean by that? And then we can work on it. And, well, you know what the magic is, my friends. When you can't do something on your computer, what you do is turn it off, reboot it. Your Windows, if it's Windows, your Windows system wants to be renewed. It is a spiritual act on the part of your computer. When I use a Microsoft computer and I think that in some way I am subsidizing Bill Gates, but there's no way around it, because what are you going to use? What company is now defends the rational, the decent, and let alone celebrates America? I mean, it's so unheard of. There's a very interesting thing going on at the New York Times. Bret Stephens came to the New York Times about 5 years ago, where from the Wall Street Journal, where in fact he had won a Pulitzer Prize for his columns. And he was a never-Trumper. He devoted a great deal of time to excoriating Donald Trump. And other than that, he is a fighter for many of the things that I fight for. In fact, we have been on programs together, which I'm sure you could find them on YouTube, and we debated. He wrote a whole column about me and my support of the president, former president, and I wrote a response to him. But it's all a good dialogue between friends. Well, now that there is no longer a Donald Trump to excoriate, what is Bret Stephens going to do? Well, to his credit, he's excoriating the left. In fact, in one instance, just 2 weeks ago, and I had never heard this happening at the New York Times, or for that matter, any major newspaper, his column was written and then rejected by the publisher. He would not publish it. It was a defense of a reporter, their chief, I think, COVID reporter, who had about, 20 years ago, in a trip to Peru, he was talking about the N-word, not using it to call anybody, just mentioning it because it was relevant in discussing whatever he was discussing, literature or whatever, and he has been fired. Back in a moment.